These are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone. Welcome to our webinar on Reaching New Heights, Tips and Tricks for Writing Your SIGUCCS paper. My name is Beth Rugg from Ithaca College. I'm the Professional Development Coordinator for SIGUCCS and will be helping to facilitate this event. Trevor Murphy from Williams College will be the main presenter. Lori Fox and Jean Tagliamonte, 2013 program coordinators, are also on the line. Before we jump into the webinar, let's just go over some quick information about how the technology works. By default, everyone is muted, so you have two ways to communicate with us. You can either raise your hand or type in a question. So, could everyone raise their hand? Just want to make sure you see how to use that. Great, thank you. And then can everyone just quickly send me a hello using the question box? Great, thank you. Well, it looks like you, oh, thank you. I feel really loved at this point. So, right now I'm going to turn it over to Trevor, and he'll be telling you some tips and tricks for writing your paper.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for participating in this webinar. I hope that you find this useful. I have written a few papers, and I have been on the program committee in the past. So I hope you find this useful. I've given some thought to what might be helpful just based on my previous experience. But I'm sure there are plenty of other tips out there, and the program committee and your readers and your track chairs are also going to be full of ideas which I may not cover. These are just ideas I've thought of on my own. One thing I like to do when I start a paper is just really lower the bar in terms of my expectations, because a first draft, it can be really intimidating to get started. So what I'll do, I guess I have a slide in here about what we're going to talk about. I forgot that. So before I get into that, I guess we'll go over what we'll talk about. So getting started, getting organized, the template, the program committee, and I like to throw in a little bit about the types of edits, because there's several different ways to edit a paper, and I like to break it into different types of editing, because I find that can be useful. So I'll talk about that a little bit. So getting organized. Staring at a blank screen, staring at a blank document, it's difficult to imagine how you're going to write a professional paper from scratch. But you're not starting from scratch, actually. You've already put together a title and an abstract. So what I like to do is get organized with maybe an outline. Maybe you use an outline. Maybe you use, you can do a concept map. I did this paper on reading, writing, and presenting for SIGUCCS a year or two ago. I think it might have been 3 years now. But first thing I would do with my title is try to think about what I'm going to do in terms of breaking this into smaller bits and pieces. And then once I have it in smaller pieces, then I'm not writing a whole paper. I'm just writing those little bits and pieces, which then all assemble into the final paper. So regardless of what your main topic is, you probably are going to have a section that defines the context for your paper. And for me, for this particular paper, it was about the ACM and the SIGUCCS. But for you, it'll probably be about your school, your institution, and how many students are there, and is it a state school, is it private, is it, what's the staffing like for your particular issue. Setting the context is really important. You don't want to skip it, because even though your topic might be video and instruction or help desk, whoever's reading the paper, they might be wondering, is this paper going to be the one that speaks to my issues? And if they see that you're a peer institution or a similar school, maybe from a different state, but maybe with the same kind of enrollment, it might speak to whether that your solutions are going to resonate with them. So setting the context will definitely be one of your sections. You might not call it context. It'll probably be called something about your institution or what your institution is like. So another section, because it starts with reading, writing, and presenting, starting with reading, and then breaking down reading into the types of readings. The big picture is my name for not getting into the nitty-gritty of spelling and grammar, but if you're going to talk about presenting, are you going to talk about presentation styles and PowerPoint? And if you are reading a paper on presenting, and it doesn't say anything about that, as an editor, whether you're editing your own paper or someone else's, you might ask, hey, are you going to cover this? Reading for formatting is simply, does it apply to the template? You need to be conforming with the standards that ACM has set for their publication. And that means, for example, at the end of every sentence, there's a single space and not a double space. So that would be something that would need to be changed, and that's one of those non-negotiable formats. And then spelling and grammar, which is one of those things where we're looking for clarity. So those are some types of readings. And then also I thought a section on how to mark up documents for this particular paper. And for you, this is really just kind of organizing your paper into smaller topics. And just to finish up kind of my outline for this particular paper, I have a section on writing, and then I have subsections, and then I have a section on presenting and subsections. This is really useful. I find it useful because now when I want to start writing on the paper, maybe I have some ideas right now about the challenges of writing a paper, and I can start writing that section right now. I know where it's going to fit in. It's going to fit in somewhere. And instead of writing the whole paper, I can just write that challenges paragraph or two, and I'll have that for later. Or I can start on what it's like to write for a poster instead of a panel. It's a lot less intimidating when you break it down into chunks. And then furthermore, I'm going to take this outline, this information, whatever format you have it in, and put it right into the template and own that template really soon. So the template is a download. You go to the website that I have listed here, and there are multiple templates, but you probably want the Microsoft Word one, although some people are more comfortable with something else like a LaTeX template, which then your output would be a PDF instead of a Word document. And what this does for you is it gets you a document that has all the styles already applied to it. It looks like what I have on this slide here. It doesn't have your abstract. It has a fake abstract. It's a very modest fake abstract. And it looks and reads a little bit like, it's just talking about the template itself. It's kind of a meta document, the template about the template. And I like to cut and paste right into this to get started. And the reason is that this document has all the styles that you're going to use. This is that formatting that we said was non-negotiable that the ACM requires. And looking at these styles, you see that they have headings and then the first level subheadings, so heading 2, heading 3, those you might use. You might not get down to heading 9, But what's included is not just the font and the whether it's bold or italic, but also the spacing that goes around it. You don't have to manually add spacing after paragraphs or anything like that. It's all built into the template styles. If you haven't used styles before, it's good to just play with the template. Don't worry about breaking it. You can download a new copy anytime you want and change things from one style to another just so you get a sense of what that's like. So right away, first thing, I replace the fake abstract with my abstract. I replace the title with my title. I put in my name and institution in the middle author section because I'm just a one-person author. I don't need the other two, so I've deleted those. And I put in my headings that I got from my outline, my section on readers, and then the 3 different types of reading is a subheading. And then I've broken that down into other parts, so I have subheadings. And I'm starting to make progress and make it look like a document that I'm working on. Now I have a place to put whatever section I choose to work on. I have a place to put it now. I love that step when you have your headings in and you can start deleting the fake text and putting in real stuff, even if it's modest, even if I'm just telling myself I need to have something on this topic. And so I'm going to pretend I'm writing an email to a friend about the 3 different types of readings. And I just type it right into my paper, and as modest as it might be, I'll have a draft. You can always improve a draft, but if you self-censor yourself so much that you can't get anything down, it's hard to see how to move forward. So that's why this approach works for me. So as you delete things to make room, there might be something about the template you don't understand. Maybe the style, maybe it's got some strange behavior that it's doing. Maybe there's a page break and you can't see it, but you know that halfway through the page it suddenly goes blank, and it's not until page 2 that you get to the rest of your content. These things happen with the template. It's got a lot of styles and formatting built in for you. So what I do when this happens is I change the view. On the menu in Microsoft Word, there's a menu item called View, and you have several options there. And I usually work in print layout. I think that's the default. But you can change it to draft layout or not web layout. I avoid that. But there are ways where it displays the information in a different way that can sometimes make those page breaks visible, and then you can click on them or delete them or change them or move them as required. Also, I like the paragraph button that's just under the main menu, and it's this, it's the symbol for paragraph, and I have it highlighted there as it's depressed. This can sometimes make things visible that are invisible that affect the formatting, and by turning it on, it will make it evident what needs to be changed. But if you're lost, ask for help. It doesn't really help you to make progress if you're frozen, stuck with a problem with your document. And someone who's had a little bit more time struggling with the template can help you out. It's not to say that I expect that you're going to have trouble with the template, but just in case. And then there's a couple sections to the paper that, if this is your first paper, might seem really unfamiliar. And they're on the first page of the template. And we have the categories and subject descriptors. And then there's a link to a website that will give you a list of what these are. And the task then is to find out where your paper fits in this kind of kind of descriptive categories that the Association for Computing Machinery has put together. Now, the Association for Computing Machinery is a big institution, and they have many SIGs, not just SIGUCCS. There's 40-some SIGs. And so some of them are very technical and very quantitative. And so some of these categories might not seem like they have anything to do with the work that we do. And the ones that seem like they might be related might actually be a really specific, they might have a very technical description for a particular type of paper that has nothing to do with the work we do anyway. So it can be confusing, but I would browse through the classification scheme that's given on the website and pick the one that you think best applies and ask for help. And we will get it right before it's published. The program committee will make sure of that. The general terms, they have 16 terms. You kind of delete the ones that don't apply. And like, for example, performance. If we think of performance in terms of the help desk's performance, I'm pretty sure that ACM is thinking in terms of microchip performance and that kind of thing, processor performance. So it might not map exactly to the general terms that we would think of for SIGUCCS. But I think some things do apply. Documentation often applies to our papers, human factors. So you just pick the ones, that you think are closest. And then keywords is really where you get to put in the words that really apply to what you're doing. So if you are doing a paper on lecture capture, for example, lecture capture doesn't really fit in with the general terms or the categories and subject descriptors like in an obvious way, but in the keywords you can put in lecture capture and all the other terms that you think would help someone find your paper if they were out looking for it in the ACM library. And then finally there's that copyright statement, which in your draft you might have just the default where it says conference, it doesn't have the correct information, but there will be a point at which the program committee gets you the correct copyright statement that will be put on the bottom of the front page of your paper. And then finally, when you do send in your draft, your readers may very well use track changes to give you feedback. And if you haven't experienced that before, you can play with it yourself. In Microsoft Word, under the Review tab, you can turn on track changes. And from that moment on, any change you make to your document is saved as either a comment or an edit, and you can, it allows someone to make comments and changes without destroying the integrity of the document itself, without just replacing it, so that then when you get a document that has changes made, you can accept some changes or rephrase things and gradually go through the comments and feedback. If you've submitted a PDF because you've edited the paper using LaTeX type editor, then there is a way to mark up PDFs in Acrobat Professional that will probably be used. That is a lot like the track changes of Microsoft Word. So I want to just say a couple words about the program committee, because having been an author and thinking about when particularly my first couple papers, I wasn't exactly clear on the role of the program committee. I knew they had expectations for me. They had set some deadlines for me, and I was either ready for those deadlines or not. And I think it's helpful to kind of think about, what their role is, what they're trying to do, and they're really there to help you be successful. They really want you to have the best paper that you can put together to represent SIGUCCS and your institution and your professional development. And I think that when you see that they're on your side, those deadlines that they send to you are a little less scary. So having been a track chair, I think that we really appreciate it when authors tell the track chair and the program committee if there are any difficulties. And also, while we're on this point, say there's a deadline for a draft coming up and you're a little bit nervous about that. And maybe your paper is supposed to be around 8 pages, but you've got 2 pages. It's okay to submit what you have. An imperfect draft is far better than nothing, because the track chairs really do, they want to report to the program committee if there are any difficulties, if people are struggling, if they want to know where you are in the process. And if you are so nervous about your imperfect draft, because drafts just by their very nature are imperfect, that you've set nothing, they'll be wondering. They won't know where you are. And if you don't have anything because of, work life, family life, it's important to let them know. I think as an author, particularly a first-time author, I felt a lot of pressure about this, and I've been very tentative about sharing what my actual status was at the time, and that later on when I was track chair, I was on the opposite side wondering, an author hasn't sent something in. Is something wrong? Are they having difficulties? Are they having writer's block? There's all these things that we can help with, but we don't even know what help is required. And so I think that, I would recommend more communication rather than less. And if you have an imperfect draft, I think that, particularly if this is your first paper, I mean, that's expected. Everyone has imperfect drafts. That's why they're called drafts. And once you send them in, then you can get the 3 types of feedback. I talked about the template help, applying the format to what you submitted so that you have a paper that has the correct formatting, and that'll make it look really great. And it'll have those questions that might help clarify particular sections, those big picture view from 10,000 feet. Like if this is a paper on lecture capture, what are your electronic classrooms like? You don't actually mention that in your paper. I think that that's a relevant point. And that'll help, because you'll be like, oh, I need another section. Or that, just the kind of feedback on clarity of language, like suggestions on rewording things or questions about how things are worded. So all of that is helpful, but it starts when you submit a draft, and it can't start until you send a draft. So making sure you have something to share by that time that deadline rolls along is very helpful.
Trevor, we do have a question.
Sure.
And Laura, you might weigh in on this, but the question is, could you describe the difference between full papers and poster papers besides the page count?
Right. I mean, I have written both, and they're really very, very similar. I think the poster is, the real difference is in the presentation and the page length. Both poster papers and presentation papers have the same formatting and the very same, you need to set the context. I think that for me, it's the presentation that's really different. So if Lori wants to speak to that.
Well, I think some of it, too, is that the topics are actually somewhat different, too. in a poster paper, I'm more likely to read it ahead of time. So what I'm looking for in a poster paper is a lot of details about the project to get me asking questions. Whereas the paper that I'm preparing for presentation, sometimes I hold things back, especially some details that I might want to just present at the conference. Um, I think too that you can, in your poster paper, since the length is shorter, you can be much more focused. It's not as broad of a topic. My papers tend to be, well, my papers tend to be pretty short anyway. I don't worry about submitting an 8-page paper. So I don't see, like Trevor, they're both very similar. I think it depends more on what your topic is, what the length of your paper is like.
Great, thank you.
I certainly find with the shorter paper lengths that sometimes you just write in a very dense style, because just to get your ideas organized and together, you might find yourself at the poster paper limit really quick, at which point you'll have to decide what parts to kind of shrink or reduce, and you end up with just a very lucid and short and tight paper. Whereas you don't have that limitation with the presentation. I don't reach the 8-page limit and start condensing. It's more like I feel like that gives me enough space to really explore something and give examples and whatnot, because there is room for that. Furthermore, in the poster, you might have it might be very graphical what you want to share, because why else would you want such a visual kind of medium for presentation? But in the paper, you won't have room per se for a lot of graphic images. Whereas with a paper, that's where they would go. I mean, if you had charts and graphs of, say, survey results and whatnot, then the paper is a good format for that, because it's 8 pages and you have room for graphics. Those are just my thoughts on it. At this point, I've presented pretty much what I wanted to share, and I'd like to open it up to questions. I'm sure there are things that I didn't mention, or tips or tricks that will occur to maybe Lori or Beth. So I'd like to open it up, if we could.
Well, this is Lori. I do think that this year you'll find that Jean and I are right on top of deadlines. So I loved what you said, Trevor, about authors communicating with us if they run into something that's going to cause their paper to be delayed. I mean, certainly we want to give our readers enough time for thoughtful comments, and I find that if we compress our editing time frame, that makes it more difficult to complete the papers. So I thought that was an amazing suggestion, and you will start to hear from Jean and I in just a few weeks that, here we are, we're approaching the deadline, anyone having any issues, anybody need anything, so that we can stick to our publication deadlines.
I really like it when readers receive a paper and they write back to, say, the track chair and the author and say, I intend to read this by this date, because then you're not wondering, and if it happens to get to that date and you haven't heard, you feel okay about inquiring what the
Right.
status is. That really helps, because then you're not kind of in that mystery realm of, like, should I ask? I haven't heard anything. Maybe everything's fine. Um, it, it it always helps when we communicate a little bit more fully with each other through the process, because it just helps us be more efficient about um, our use of time.
Right.
This is Beth. I have a question for the audience. How many of you write as a part of your normal job? If you could just raise your hands. So it looks to me like about a third of you do that, maybe a third to a half. Just personally, I think for those of you who are not used to writing, I know when I first wrote my paper, it'd probably been, a significant period of time, let's say about 10 or 20 years before I'd written a paper, since I'd written the paper in college. So there's a bit of a mind game where you just have to kind of get back into it and remember how to write a paper and how to just, looking at a blank sheet of paper is one of the first hurdles to overcome. And I think you can do that just by, as Trevor mentioned, writing your outline and then just filling in the gaps. The second biggest hurdle, again, as Trevor alluded to, I think, is the template itself and just working with the templates. So at either one of those points, just feel free to reach out to people if you need help. Lori, we do have a question from Diane. This is first paper. Where do I find the deadlines? Lori, are you there?
I am, but my audio's cutting in and out. What was the question?
Sure. This is my first paper. Where do I find the deadlines?
Okay. Jean and I sent out notes to all accepted authors, and I can put it down here in the, I can only send it to
Well, I can.
you. Can you copy that Google Doc?
Yeah, Trevor, let me take control of the screen if that's okay.
Oh, sure.
So everyone, I believe what you're seeing, let's see. Does everyone see my screen?
Oh, there it is.
I see it.
Okay, great. So Lori, this is just a copy of the email that I think everyone received. Or Lori, I'll let you talk about it.
Well, this is, I want to
Let me scroll down.
my version of the received. They're also linked from the SIGUCCS 2013 conference website, and it has all of the directions and resources and deadlines that you need for your paper.
Right, and right there, first draft is due May 1st.
Yep.
Another question just came in. If a proposal was accepted for a presentation, can it be readjusted or readapted instead to a poster?
It can, instead of a paper,
Yes,
instead of a presentation,
instead of a presentation, yes. Can it be readjusted to a poster?
I would just say to email Jean and myself, and we can talk about it.
Great, thank you. Any other questions out there? Here's one. If we get our drafts in earlier than the deadlines, can we expect to hear back sooner?
Probably not too much sooner. We, behind the scenes, we have track chairs for 5 out of 6 tracks. And we are starting to work with them this week and next week. So it'll probably be a couple weeks before they're into the system. So if you turned it in a week early, that's about the earliest that you would start to hear.
Great.
Also, everyone should keep an eye on the Facebook page for this event. Jean and I will be putting reminders and tips out on the Facebook event page too to help our authors along.
Lori, we have another question. In typical papers, how much data is presented, and what kind of data is typically presented?
Well, there are several different kinds of papers. A technical paper that is about a specific product or implementation of a product probably has the most data of any of the papers. I do feel like paper is almost like a sandwich where the outer layers of the sandwich, such as the context, the ACM required things, those are the same in every paper. And then the meat of the paper and even the length of the paper depends on how in-depth your presentation goes. I usually try to include data in my paper. It makes for a more interesting paper, and it's nice to have something concrete. I also find that it breaks up the paper a little bit and almost makes it easier to read if your eye can look at a graph, for example, to look at the data instead of just reading about it. Some papers are filled with graphs and charts, and some have none. They don't typically have very many just graphics, but they might have survey responses or performance statistics. But I would say, Trevor, I don't see many papers that have more than 2 or 3 graphs sort of things in them.
But like you said, it depends on the paper. There are some where there are graphical representations of data or network kind of schematics, and they're really crucial to the paper. And the paper might have a number of those. And then there are even cases sometimes where the graphic needs to be of a size that crosses the entire, because we have a 2-column kind of format, but it goes all the way across just because that's just the nature of the graphic. And so there are exceptions, but it depends on the paper. So if that's the kind of story you're going to tell, and that's the kind of evidence that you have, then you put it together in a draft, and then we will see how we can best apply the template format to the content. And that'll be something that we'll all be working on. That'll be the both you as an author and also the reader and track chair.
One more question. Does everything you put in the presentation need to be in the submitted paper?
I would
say no. I think that oftentimes you've got your draft due the end of this month, and then your story will develop or change between now and the conference. So I would say no.
Trevor, I would agree with that. I know I've put in papers where you're talking about an implementation, so at the point you put in the paper, you know at least the planning and maybe the initial aspects of it. By the time you actually get to present on it, you can usually include post-implementation data, how it was accepted by the users, how the chain was managed, etc. Just that's information that wasn't available when you actually had to turn in the paper, because you actually turn in the paper at least 2 to 3 or 4 months even in front of the conference.
The links between the paper and the presentation are going to be pretty strong. So it's not like you're going to change subjects. But a lot can happen in technology and implementations in 4 months or so. So there might very well be additional information.
And everyone, this is Beth again. I have another comment. ACM is actually, I'm on the board, and ACM is actually gave the board some options as to when the papers would be available to our membership. And I believe the board has recommended that those papers would be available a week in front of the conference. So assuming that this all works out, the idea is people could actually read the paper, and then my guess is they're going to come to your presentation not to have the paper rehashed, but to get other information that you weren't able to include in the paper. Same topic, same idea, but I really think your presentation, you don't want to just be spitting back everything that's in the paper, because anybody can read that without coming to the presentation. Okay, another question. Can adjustments be added to papers after they are submitted, even after the presentation?
No, right? This is Lori. That's a no, because they get submitted for printing at the end of, what is the month?
I think it's August, isn't it, Lori?
It is. I think you're right. Because usually, now I think it's early August, because I think usually the paper is sent to the ACM publishing company before we start back to college in the fall. And the paper cannot be, it'll be published, the paper can't be changed after then.
Right, and I just wanted to comment on the ACM publishing kind of practice. It really is a big deal to be published in the ACM library. Anybody can access your paper, and I mean, you're going to turn over the copyright to ACM. I believe that's still true. And people will in fact actually pay to access your paper if they currently don't have that privilege by being either a member of SIGUCCS or a member of ACM. So it is pretty important as to the formatting and the content of the paper, and I believe, as Lori said, that it can't be changed. Oh, sorry. So I just answered your question. Are submitted papers published publicly outside of SIGUCCS ACM? They're published in the ACM Digital Library. ACM members and SIGUCCS members can access papers in the library. But as I just alluded to, if the others can find the abstract, but then if they actually wanted the paper, they would have to pay for it. I believe that's right, Lori and Trevor. I think I'm right.
I think so too.
Okay. So it's good news. You'll be published. Your name will be available on the internet. Any other questions? Well, I think just to summarize, we hope, I believe Trevor's given you some tips and tricks as to how to write your paper and help you get started on this journey. And just to highlight, please communicate. Please keep in touch with your track chair or the program chairs. There are many people who are more than willing to help you through this process. Lori, Trevor, any final closing comments?
No,
I just want to wish, oh, go ahead.
No, I just said thank you for attending.
I just wish everyone a pleasant journey through this process. I think that this is one of the best ways to advance through your professional development. It makes your professional development real. You're going to write this paper and present, and my experience has always been that when you share that work that you're doing on your campus, people will seek you out because you're presenting it. You're being very visible talking about this particular topic, and other people will share their own stories with you, and I think that it'll make your experience at the conference a very active one. And I would just say, whether it's a poster or a panel or a paper, just enjoy that experience, and I think you'll get more out of the SIGUCCS conference than you probably thought possible if you're a first-time author.
Thank you, Trevor. If all the technology worked correctly, this session has been recorded, and it should be available on the SIGUCCS website probably within the next few days. So thank you all for your time. It's been great. Trevor, thank you. You did a wonderful job. Lori as well. Bye, everyone.